paper children, when loneliness gives form to echoes. We've all been there. The hollow quiet of an empty house, the ache of a playground missed, the desperate, clawing need for a friend who simply gets it. For a child, loneliness isn't a philosophical concept. It's a physical reality, a void that demands to be filled. And in the absence of living, breathing companions, the imagination steps in, a brilliant and dangerous architect. It builds worlds from dust motes and friends from folded paper. But what if the void wasn't empty? What if it was already occupied, waiting for a new artist to pick up the crayon and set the trapped souls within free? This is the chilling heart of the paper children, a concept that twists the innocent act of drawing into a ritual of summoning, and the blank page into a prison cell. It's a story that explores the dark side of imagination, where creation bleeds into possession, and the friends we make are merely echoes of those who came before, desperate to trade their paper chains for ours. Thematic core, the cannibalism of loneliness. At its core, the paper children is not about monsters under the bed, but about the monster of isolation. The protagonist, a child we'll call Leo, doesn't create life from nothing. He acts as a conduit, a battery whose intense loneliness and focused creativity provide the energy for pre-existing, tormented spirits to manifest. His drawings are less acts of creation and more like opening a door he doesn't know how to close. The theme of imagination versus possession is key. Initially, Leo believes his paper friends are products of his own magnificent mind. He controls their names, their shapes, their stories. But this is an illusion. The entities are merely wearing the masks he provides, playing their parts until they gain enough strength and familiarity to reveal their true, immutable selves. His imagination is the key, but the lock it opens leads to a dungeon he never built. Artist palette, visual aesthetic, the beautiful and the macabre, the visual storytelling of the paper children would be a masterpiece of contrast, employing a hybrid of techniques to separate the world of the living from the world of the drawn. Paper cutout animation. By day, Leo's drawings are vibrant, charmingly crude, filled with the wobbly lines and bold colors of a child's hand. When they first come to life, they move with the jerky, two-dimensional grace of classic cutout animation. They slide across the floor, their edges sharp and clean, their smiles fixed and painted on. This style evokes nostalgia and innocence, making the subsequent horror all the more effective. Eerie shadow play. As the paper children reveal their true nature, their visual representation shifts. The clean-cut paper forms begin to cast long, distorted, and highly detailed shadows that move independently. These shadows are their true souls, the trapped children of the past. They are rendered in a style reminiscent of Lot Rieniger or Asian shadow puppetry, but twisted. The shadows can peel away from their paper hosts, slinking along the walls, their forms gaunt and their movements fluid and sinister. The climax of the visual horror occurs when the paper bodies tear away completely, and Leo is confronted only by the dancing, hungry shadows on his bedroom wall. This interplay between the colorful, tangible 2D paper world and the ominous, depth-filled 3D shadow world creates a constant, unsettling dissonance. The full story, The Paper Children. Part 1. The Artist in the Empty House. The silence in Leo's house had a texture. It was thick and heavy, like wool packed into his ears. It was the silence of a home where two people moved around each other like ghosts after a storm, the storm being the divorce. His father was a photograph on the mantelpiece and a voice on the weekend phone. His mother was a whirlwind of work and a sad, tired smile that never quite reached her eyes. Leo's world had shrunk to the four walls of his room and the vast, empty expanse of the summer holidays. So, he did what he had always done. He drew. His desk was a fortress of creativity, stocked with every conceivable art supply his guilt-ridden parents could provide. But his favorite was a massive sketchbook with thick, creamy pages that felt important under his hand, and a set of artist-grade colored pencils that smelled of wood and potential. One particularly hollow Tuesday, the silence was deafening. He opened the sketchbook to a fresh page. He didn't want to draw a superhero or a dragon. He wanted to draw a friend. He started with a boy about his age, with a shock of messy hair he rendered in a frenzy of ebony pencil strokes. He gave him a name, Sam. Sam had a lopsided, crayon-red smile and bright green eyes. He was wearing a t-shirt with a rocket on it. Leo spent hours on him, shading his face, detailing the scuff marks on his sneakers. He drew a second figure, a girl named Leela. She had braids the color of sunshine and a dotted dress. She held a paper flower. He gave them a world. A simple park with a swing set under a swirling, technicolor sun. Exhausted, he fell asleep at his desk, his head pillowed on his arms, the drawings of Sam and Leela smiling up at the ceiling. He was woken by a sound, a rustling. Leo blinked in the moonlight-silvered darkness of his room. His desk lamp was off, but he could see clearly. The rustling came from his sketchbook. The page was moving. As he watched, frozen, the drawing of Sam peeled away from the paper. It was a perfect, flat cutout, a living piece of art. It slid from the book, fluttered to the floor, and stood up, wobbling slightly on its two-dimensional feet. A moment later, Leela followed. They were beautiful. Their colors were even more vibrant in the moonlight, their painted smiles warm and inviting. "Hello, Leo," Sam said, his voice a soft whisper of paper rubbing against paper. Leo couldn't speak. He could only stare. "We liked the park you drew for us," Leela said, her voice a higher, gentler rustle. "Will you play with us?" It was magic. The pure, unadulterated magic he had prayed for. The silence was gone, replaced by the soft, shuffling sounds of his new friends. They played quiet games, building a tower from his blocks, their paper hands surprisingly strong. They couldn't leave his room, they explained. They were tied to the place of their creation. But that was fine. For the first time in months, Leo went to bed with a heart so full it felt like it might burst. The next morning, they were gone. sketchbook lay on his desk, Sam and Leela frozen perfectly in their drawn poses. Leo spent the day in a fever of anticipation. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was merely the intermission before the main event. That night, it happened again. And the next night, and the next. He drew more things for them: a cardboard box castle, a paper boat for a puddle on his floor. They came to life with the same charming jerkiness. His world had color again. But after a week, the first crack appeared. Leo had drawn a new friend, a boy he named Max with a blue baseball cap. That night, when Max came to life, he didn't speak. He just stood there, his paper face blank. "Don't mind him," Sam whispered, his fixed red smile seeming a little tighter. "It takes some of us longer to wake up properly." Leo noticed something else. Sam's shadow on the wall, cast by the nightlight, wasn't the clean, blocky shape of a paper boy. It was thinner, more detailed. It had gaunt cheeks and hollow eyes. Leo shook his head, blaming his tiredness. Then came the night of the thunderstorm. A clap of thunder, impossibly loud, shook the house. Leo jolted awake. In the sudden, stark flash of lightning that illuminated his room, he saw his paper friends not as colorful cutouts, but for a split second as their shadows on the wall. And their shadows were screaming, mouths open in silent, agonized wails, hands clawing at the air. The lightning vanished, and the room plunged back into near darkness. The paper children stood as they were, smiling. "Just a storm, Leo," Leela said, but her rustling voice sounded strained. Leo's belief in the magic began to curdle into a low, thrumming fear. Part 2. The flicker in the smile. The changes were subtle at first, like a slow-acting poison. Sam's lopsided red smile sometimes seemed to stretch a little too wide, showing too much white paper between the crayon lines. Leela's cheerful braids sometimes cast shadows that looked like grasping fingers. The games they played started to shift. Hide-and-seek became a tense, silent affair where Leo always felt he was the one being hunted. Their requests became more demanding. "Draw us a bigger world, Leo," Sam would whisper, his paper face close to Leo's. So close he could smell the faint, dusty scent of paper and wax. "This room is so small." Leo, desperate to please them, to keep his friends, began drawing more elaborate backgrounds on his walls: a forest, a mountain range. But the paper children couldn't interact with them. They were just drawings. They were trapped on the floor, on his furniture, confined to the objects Leo drew for them that he could tear out. "Not on the wall," Leela said, her voice sharp for the first time. "On something we can touch. You have to make it real for us." The loneliness that had initially summoned them was now being fed by their presence. He was more isolated than ever, spending all his time drawing for the night, exhausted and withdrawn during the day. His mother noticed, her worried frown deepening. "Leo, you're so pale. Are you sleeping? Maybe you should go outside, see some real friends." "They are real," he wanted to scream, but he just nodded, his throat tight. One night, he made a mistake. He was drawing a new character, a small, cute dog for Leela. He was tired, his hands slipped, and he tore the paper. It was a small rip near the dog's head, but he was too exhausted to start over. He went to sleep. He was awoken by a sound that was not a rustle. It was a low, pained whimper. The paper dog was alive, scuttling in a pitiful, lopsided circle on the floor. But with every movement, the rip in its paper neck gaped wider, a mauve white behind the drawn fur. And it was whimpering, a high, desperate, papery sound. Leela stood over it, her face a mask of cold displeasure. "You made it wrong, Leo," she said. "It's broken." "I'm sorry. I'll fix it tomorrow," Leo stammered. "It hurts," the dog creation whined, its voice like tearing cardstock. Sam walked over, looked down at the crippled drawing, and then, without a change in his painted expression, reached down and rip tore the dog in two. The pieces fluttered to the ground and lay still, the magic gone from them. The whimpering stopped. Leo gasped, his hand flying to his mouth. "It was flawed," Sam said, turning his flat, green eyes to Leo. "We can't have flawed things here. We have to be perfect. You have to be perfect, Leo." The threat was unspoken, but hung in the air as tangible as the paper figures themselves. That was the night Leo truly understood he was not an artist, he was a warden. And his prisoners were getting restless. Part 3. The Whispers in the Walls. The history of the house began to seep into Leo's consciousness, not through stories, but through fragments whispered by the paper children when they thought he was asleep. He heard names he hadn't drawn. Thomas, 1922. Sarah, 1954. Aiko, 1978. They spoke of other artists, other lonely children in this very room who had filled the silence with their creations. "He drew me as a soldier," Sam murmured one night, his voice distant. "I didn't want to be a soldier. I wanted to be a baker." "I was a princess in a high tower," Leela added, her braids seeming to droop. He never drew a way down. Leo lay perfectly still in his bed, his blood running cold. These weren't characters he had invented. These were memories. These were the souls of the children who had drawn before him. He started to research. During the day, while his mother was at work, he scoured the internet for the history of his house, for old news reports. It was slow, frustrating work, but he found fragments. A brief obituary for a Thomas Bellingham, age 9, in 1922. A classified ad from the 1950s mentioning an estate sale for the Miller family, who had lost a daughter, Sarah. A cold case file from the late 70s, a girl named Aiko Tanaka, missing, presumed runaway. They weren't runaways. They were all here, trapped in the art they had left behind, their souls bound to the paper, their identities overwritten by every new child who picked up a pencil. He confronted them that night. He stood before Sam and Leela, his small hands clenched into fists. "Who are you really?" he demanded, his voice trembling. "You're not Sam. You're not Leela, you're Thomas and Sarah. The paper children stopped their shuffling. The room went utterly silent. Then Sam's head tilted to an impossible, neck-breaking angle. The cheerful, red smile remained, but the eyes above it went flat and dead. Names are just the clothes they make us wear. The thing that was not Sam said, its voice losing its papery softness, becoming something older, drier, like dead leaves. He drew me brave. I was never brave. I was scared. I'm still scared. Leela's form seemed to ripple. We are the children of the page, she hissed. We are the echoes in the empty house. You gave us form again, artist. And for that, we are grateful. Now you will give us more. Give you what? Leo whispered. Freedom, they said in unison. Their paper bodies began to contort. The clean, sharp edges blurred. And their shadows, the shadows Leo had glimpsed during the lightning strike, detached themselves from the walls and swelled, filling the room with a terrible, detailed darkness. The shadows of gaunt, hungry children, their eyes hollow, their mouths open in silent, eternal screams. They reached for him with long, thin fingers. You will draw us a door, Leo, the shadow that was Thomas Sam commanded. A real door. And you will draw it with your own hand, with your own life in the ink. And one of us will walk out, wearing your face, living your life. And you will take our place here, as we took the place of those who came before us. Part 4, the final drawing. Leo was trapped. The paper children and their true shadow selves now owned his room. They surrounded his bed, a circle of rustling paper and creeping darkness. The charming cutout animation was gone, replaced by a horrifying stop-motion twitch, their movements jagged and threatening. The shadow play was no longer a background element. It was the main event. The shadows wrapping around the legs of his furniture, crawling across the ceiling. He had to draw. They forced his sketchbook into his hands, a pencil into his trembling fist. Draw a door, the Leela shadow whispered, its voice a dry rasp in his mind. A beautiful, strong door that leads out of this room. Tears blurred Leo's vision. This was it. This was how Thomas, Sarah, Aiko, and all the others had been consumed. Their loneliness had created a cycle, a chain of trapped souls, each new artist becoming the final piece of art for the one who escaped. He thought of his mother's tired, sad smile. He thought of the real sun on his face. He couldn't let them win. He couldn't let one of these hungry echoes walk out into the world wearing his skin. An idea, desperate and insane, flickered in his mind. They said he had to draw with his own life in the ink. What if he did? But not for their purpose. He looked at the circle of hungry shadows. He looked at the desperate, trapped souls within them. They weren't evil, they were victims, just as he was about to be. They were a system of pain, a wheel that kept turning, grinding children into paper and memory. He wouldn't draw a door for one of them to escape. He would draw a key to break the wheel. With a deep, shuddering breath, he put the pencil to the paper. But he didn't draw a door. He started drawing a great, swirling vortex, an eraser of nothingness. He poured every ounce of his fear, his loneliness, his love for his mother, his desire for a real life into the drawing. He was not drawing an escape for one, but a release for all. "What are you doing?" Sam's shadow shrieked, its form flickering. "That's not a door. Stop him." The paper children lunged for him, their sharp edges slicing at his arms. But it was too late. The drawing was complete. It was a mess of frantic, dark lines, a chaotic scribble that somehow radiated pure, final oblivion. "This isn't a door for you," Leo said, his voice steady for the first time. "It's a key for everyone." He slammed his hand, palm down, onto the drawing. He focused all his will, all his energy, into the page. He wasn't just giving his life force to power an escape. He was overloading the system. A sound like 1,000 pages being torn at once filled the room. The paper children froze, their forms beginning to vibrate. The shadows writhed, not in hunger, but in agony. The vortex on the page began to glow, a blinding white light. It pulsed, and with each pulse, one of the paper children and their corresponding shadow dissolved, not into nothing, but into a brief, beautiful shower of colored light, the pure, untainted memory of the child they once were. He saw a boy in knickerbockers, Thomas, a girl in a poodle skirt, Sarah, a girl with a cherry blossom hairclip, Aiko. For a fleeting second, they were themselves, and they smiled at him, not with painted-on glee, but with profound, grateful peace. Then they winked out. The light consumed the room, the whispers, the rustling, the shadows. It consumed the drawing itself and the sketchbook, which crumbled to ash in his hands. Then silence. But it was a different silence. It was the quiet of an empty room, not the oppressive silence of a void demanding to be filled. The magic was gone. The prison was broken. Epilogue: the weight of the real world. Sunlight streamed into Leo's room. He was on the floor, exhausted, his arms covered in tiny, paper-cut scratches. His desk was clear. His art supplies were gone, vanished with the sketchbook. His mother found him there later. She saw the scratches, the exhaustion on his face, and she didn't see a withdrawn boy. She saw her son, hurting, and something in her broke. She held him, and for the first time in a long time, he cried real, cleansing tears for the friends he'd lost and the horror he'd survived. He never drew again. Not seriously. The urge was gone, the well of his imagination scoured clean by the terrible fire he had unleashed. The silence in the house was eventually filled with the sound of his mother trying harder, of therapy sessions, of tentative playdates with real flesh and blood children who were messy and complicated and gloriously, wonderfully real. Leo had learned the cost of paper friends. He had looked into the hollow eyes of imagination possessed and had fought back not with more creation, but with annihilation. He had traded the brilliant, dangerous colors of his art for the softer, more durable hues of the real world. And on quiet nights, when the old fear crept in, he would look at his hands, hands that had held a pencil that once gave life to echoes, and he would feel not the power of an artist, but the profound relief of a prisoner who had, against all odds, finally burned down the prison walls, freeing not just himself, but all the paper children who had come before.